you're going to remain nonpartisan in this role and the importance of that and being able to work collaboratively with Republicans and Democrats alike. How important do you think that is, and how are you going to collaborate with all parties here?
Well, I think it's very important for the Secretary of State to function in a nonpartisan manner. The laws have been passed by the policymakers, and it's up to the Secretary of State within the realm of the assignments to that office to fulfill those laws and that responsibility in a nonpartisan way. I think that it's good for Oregon to have someone who will be very careful about details, who will be very concerned about informing the people of what's going on. And when I was in the legislature, I had a newsletter that had, at one point, over 500,000 emails on the list. And although I was just serving Southern Oregon, I was serving the entire state, because I would write frequently about laws that were being proposed, bills that were being passed, and what the consequences would be. Because I think it was so common for people to have good intentions without stopping to think about the consequence of what this was going to mean, the cost or the effect on other people or the effect on business. And it's important that we look beyond the immediate gratification of doing something that we think is a good idea and try and say, what a consequence will this have on other people? So as Secretary of State, I will be focusing on all four aspects, really. The auditing division to help ensure that people's money is well spent, the corporations division to help ensure that we are welcoming to businesses, that we listen to Oregon businesses that are having difficulties and try and remove unnecessary regulations, that we ask ourselves the question, if this regulation was not in existence but was being considered today, would we create it? And if the answer is no, then why do we have it? And those kinds of questions are very infrequently asked. And then when it comes to the archives division, that is kind of a quiet place, but it's very important because that's where the records of our state are held. One of the first things that we're going to do is to promote finalizing a constitutional project where we raise the money independently to display the Oregon Constitution for the public to see. I mean, it needs to be safe and secure and hermetically controlled and temperature controlled so that it is safe from deterioration and negative problems, but it needs to be where the people can see it. And so that's something that's been discussed and been kind of going forward, but now we'll bring it about. So I'm excited about these opportunities. And then the audits division needs to do more than just ensure that we are complying with standard accounting practices and actually track the people's money. And so in the past, when there's been controversial issues, the attitude was, that's not our job to deal with that. We'll audit other things because the legislature will do the oversight. Well, having been in the legislature, they don't have the capacity really to do what the audits division can. And so we'll work in conjunction with the Legislative Joint Audits Committee, and we'll have a group of our auditors, when there's something that is controversial or very expensive, we'll follow it. We'll look at it from the beginning. And if there's money that seems to have been wasted, we'll track down what happened. Who's accountable? What can we learn from it so it doesn't just keep reoccurring, which has happened for 2.5 decades with IT projects that the state takes on. So anyway, I think that if we're able to do the job the way it's supposed to be done, we will be able to restore trust that in state government there is an independent agency that's acting like a GAO, a Government Accountability Office, that will not be paying attention to who's involved, but what has occurred. And when things are done right, they should be applauded. And when things are not going right, then it needs to be exposed and dealt with. We'll send recommendations to the legislature, to the governor's office, for them to take action. If we find that there's criminal problems, we will inform the right individuals under statute. It's not our job to prosecute or to go on witch hunts. It's our job to expose and help show what transparent government really is.
Mr. Secretary, do you think that being the first Republican in Oregon elected to office in 20 years marks the beginning of a conservative shift for the state?
I don't think it's so much conservative versus liberal. I think my being elected was based on the fact that I had gained credibility by exposing the Kitzhaber scandals. Realized if I hadn't have run against John Kitzhaber, he'd still be governor. But the exposure of what was going on and making it a federal issue, a letter we sent to the federal prosecutor laying out the allegations, I think it led to a cleansing of that office. Corruption should not be allowed regardless of party. Party is not a factor when people are self-dealing from their positions. That's corrupt. And so the fact that there's Republicans that are delighted that a Republican won, they may be a little disappointed because they're not going to see me doing what they would like to see as a partisan action. They're going to see me be active as hopefully a good Secretary of State. And I've told them from the beginning, even in my speech when I was first elected on a campaign, on the election night, at the end of the campaign, I said, you know, there are those of you that would like to see retribution. That's not going to happen with me. What you're going to see is honest government, and you won't be able to tell if there's a D or an R behind my name, Secretary of State.
Would you allow me to follow up on that question? When we talked in 2004, one of the things that you said you wanted to do if you became governor was you wanted to reduce state office employment by about 50%.
I never said that.
You said,
well, you know what? That is a total surprise to me. I can't imagine I would ever say that, because how would I be able to come up with a percentage? And so somebody else may have said that. It wasn't me.
you had said that you wanted to reduce state offices and the number of state employees by a large number. It was at least 30%. And I think I remember, because we talked before, and I remember you saying that you wanted to reduce the amount of state employees by a large percentage, double digits.
Okay, I do not recall ever saying that. I'm serious. If you can show me where I said that, then I will be stunned, because I'm very careful what I say, and I try not to make promises I can't keep. I do not want government to be larger than is necessary to be efficient, or smaller than is required to provide the services that the people deserve. And so that's my position. I mean, I've never signed a covenant that we're not going to raise taxes. Even when I was in the legislature, people asked me to do that. And I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm elected to do what I think is right based on the circumstances that I find. And circumstances change over time. And so I certainly have no recollection of ever saying anything like that. And I can't imagine that I said that. And it certainly has no bearing either way on the job that I'm doing now.
Right, that's what I wanted to ask, because I remember when we had that conversation, you had talked about wanting to reduce the number of state employees. That's something that you intended to do, or you talked about wanting to do as governor. But now that you're Secretary of State, how will you work to make the state more efficient in terms of the number of people who are employed, or in terms of the contracts that the state currently has, or in terms of the way some of the offices are operated?
Okay. And once again, I say I have no recollection of ever talking about a percentage of what I would do to cut government. But the question that you're asking is, you know, what can I do to help government be more efficient in the way that it operates? I think that the audits division is probably the key to that, because what we need to do is evaluate each of the agencies based on what their job is, not on what the size was in the past. But for instance, we take a look at the Department of Human Services foster care division. Do we have enough caseworkers for the children? I don't know. My guess is we don't, that they're being overworked, and that you don't have enough people with the freedom to actually be out recruiting foster parents, because that number has gone down in the number of foster parents available. And so presently you still have, as far as my knowledge, is that you still have foster care workers who are spending the night in motels or hotels or in an office with children, because they can't place them in the foster homes because there aren't enough of them. That cannot be tolerated. It's not fair to the children, and it's not fair to the foster care workers. We're driving them out of the system because they're not appreciated and they're overworked. And so we need to evaluate what is being done, not just in Oregon, but what's being done elsewhere, because this is a challenge for every state. And we can find those states that are effectively dealing with it, learn from what they've done, And then that will be part of our audit recommendations, that the policymakers consider what's taking place in another state or two and explain what's happening there so that the policymakers have neutral, nonpartisan, reliable information on solutions that can be taken, which will help, hopefully, policy decisions to be made in the future.
I'll look for that statement. If I can't find it, I'll apologize for that. I'll let it in
Okay.
for that.
Going off of that thought of auditing, are there specific agencies that you have in mind that warrant an audit? I know you've been pretty vocal about auditing Cover Oregon, for example. Are there some that stick out to you that are goals and objectives as you move into 2017?
Yes, I think that we need to look at the DEQ, for one, because of the concerns that citizens have in southeast Portland about toxic minerals in their air and in their water. And part of this is about solving people's questions. There's rumors that get out there and they get passed on, and we need to have fact that people can rely on. And so I think the DEQ deserves to be audited to help show what took place and whether or not they're culpable, and if so, what actions are they taking to see it doesn't happen again. I think that the Portland School District deserves to be looked at very closely. We send a lot of money up there, and yet you've got Lincoln High School graduating over 90% and Roosevelt graduating closer to 50%. And what is being done with the resources? Are they being adequately allocated in a way to actually make a change? Or do we just continue to get promises that, we know that there's lead pipes that the kids have been drinking out of, and there was a bond measure a few years ago, and it was passed, and it was at a time when the leaders knew that there was lead, toxic lead, in the water being drunk by the educators and the students, and yet nothing was mentioned about that. I think that it's time that we shine a light where the lights need to be shown, and I think that Portland Public Schools need to be looked at, the DEQ does, DHS. We owe it to the citizens to look at Oregon Health Authority and see what they're doing and what happened with the whole Cover Oregon fiasco. I was told it doesn't matter, it's federal money. Well, it's not federal money, it's the people's money. I don't distinguish tax dollars based on who's paying it, it's the people's money. And then you also have the situation that the whistleblower has indicated that there was money being spent that wasn't allowed to be spent. It was breaking the rules. And if that's the case, that needs to be disclosed as well. Transparency is so important for people to have confidence in their government. And I believe that I'll be in a position to help provide transparency.
In regards to that situation,